John Hancock on that little scrap of paper. We are picking up with Act 4, Scene 7. Beginning around 41 or 42. Messengers come in and they give the king a letter from Hamlet. Hamlet says, "High and mighty, you shall know I am set naked on your kingdom. Tomorrow shall I beg leave to see your kingly eyes, when I shall, first asking your pardon thereto, recount the occasion of my sudden and more strange return." All Hamlet's really doing there is saying, without overtly using the words, your plot to kill me didn't succeed. I'm back, and I'll tell you how I came back, okay? So, Laertes and the king discuss the letter. Laertes says, "Are you sure it's Hamlet's?" He says it's his handwriting. And the king says, Laertes, 57, "Will you be ruled by me? That is, will you follow the advice I'm going to give you? I, my lord, so you will not overrule me to a piece. That is, as long as you don't counsel me to give up my revenge." King, no. I'm going to overrule you to your peace, he says, to your own peace. If he be now returned, talks about Hamlet, as checking at his voyage, that is, checking, stopping, turning around, and that he means no more to undertake it, I will work him to an exploit now ripen my device. That is, I will work him to an action that I've just now thought of. Okay? Under the which he'll die, but nobody will be blamed. I won't be blamed, you won't be blamed. Everyone will think this is an accidental death. He says, Laertes says, I will be ruled, the rather if you could devise it so, that I might be the organ. Let me be the one that achieves Hamlet's death. Okay, don't worry. That's what I have in mind. It falls right, that is. That's part of my plot. And so it goes on to tell Laertes, line 69 and following, you've been talked of since your travel much. That is, while you've been at university in Paris, people have said an awful lot about you. And that is that talking, in Hamlet's hearing. For a quality wherein they say you shine. Your sum of parts did not together pluck such envy from him as did that one. That is, one particular aspect of your character has been praised that sticks in Hamlet's jaw. I mean, it just bugs him. He says, what's that? And the king goes on. Notice, he doesn't immediately say what that is. He goes on and talks about a man from France who was visiting, who told us all about you. Laertes, a Norman? He goes, yep. I think I know who would. And Laertes names him. And the king goes on, 93. He made confession of you and gave you such a masterly report for art and exercise in your defense, and for your rapier most especial. So for art and exercise in your defense, okay, skillful exercise, science of defense in sword practice. This guy Lamorde praised Laertes for his defensive martial skills. And most importantly, most especially, his use of the rapier. Now, by rapier, Shakespeare is probably intending a fencing foil, okay? The fencing foil, if you look at a foil, so if you look at it like this, it's just gonna be a long, thin piece of steel. You look at it like this, and it looks like that, okay? But it comes at the end to a point. So it's a long cube, as it were, right? Where it starts, it's probably not any thicker than this part of the marker. So that if you hold the handle by one end and the tip by the other end, you can flex that thing, all right? And the way you win in a fencing match is you get points by hitting the other person with the tip, right? This way. It can't be this way. You're not hitting them with the broadside, so to speak, all right? He says, this is what you've been praised about. So, this report of his, line 100, did Hamlet so envenom with his envy that he could nothing do but wish and beg your sudden coming over to play with you. So, this guy Lamord praised your fencing ability, and it so essentially aroused Hamlet's envy that he couldn't help but talk about, man, I wish Laertes were here. Why? So Hamlet could fence with them. Hamlet obviously fancies himself an excellent fencer. All right? So, he says, now, out of this, hold on. Was your father dear to you? Or are you like the painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart? Laertes, what are you talking about? Why do you ask? Not that I think you did not love your father, but that I know love is begun by time, and that I see in the passages of proof. Long speech, what's the point he's getting to? But to the quick, Hamlet comes back. What would you undertake to show yourself your father's son indeed more than in words? That is, in action, rather than like a painting of a son loving his father. Cut his throat in the church. He's saying, if it came to it, and Hamlet was up there praying at the altar, I'd go up and slit his throat right there. It's a pretty heinous act to kill somebody in a church. King, no place indeed should murder sanctuarize. Revenge should have no bounds. That is, a murderer should not be able to seek sanctuary anywhere. Revenge should be carte blanche. You can get it wherever. He said, no. Will you do this? I'm going to ask you to do something. Stay in your room. Hamlet's back. I want you to stay in your room. I don't want you to see Hamlet. I don't want Hamlet to know that you are here. He says, we'll put on those that shall praise your excellence and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you. So that Hamlet's come back, I'm going to encourage some people to praise your excellent abilities with the foil. In fact, to overpraise your excellent abilities. Why? So that he, Hamlet, being remiss, most generous and free from all contriving, will not peruse the foil. So, when Hamlet discovers you are back, after he's heard all this praise about you, he says, we'll set up a fencing match. And because Hamlet, notice, is generous and free from all contriving. What is he saying about Hamlet there? What does that mean that he's generous and free from all contriving? He won't suspect anything. Why? Because Hamlet's a good person, is what the king means. Notice what the king does not know about Hamlet. What has Hamlet been doing ever since the end of whatever scene it is in Act 1, I think Act 2 or scene 2 or 3 in Act 1 after Hamlet sees the ghost? He's been acting. At times putting on a madness, etc. Contriving, in other words, conspiring. So, he says he won't peruse the foils. Hamlet won't take any time to look at the swords. And he says, and you may, with the sword unbaited, kill him. See, now in a normal fencing match, fencing is it used to be, I don't know if it still is, an Olympic sport. Okay? In a fencing match, you've got the foil, and the blade of the foil is like 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet long. In a fencing match, the tip here that I said was pointed, the tip is what's called baited. It's got a soft thing put on the end. It could be a piece of wood, a piece of rubber, to stop it from puncturing the other person. Okay? You know you get points by how the sword, how the foil bends when you hit someone with it. point, etc. Okay? Hamlet won't check the tips, he's saying. Why? Because he wouldn't expect anybody to play dirty. You can kill him that way. That's option one for killing Hamlet. Laertes, I'll do it. And to that purpose, for that purpose, meaning the purpose of killing Hamlet, he says, I'll anoint my sword with poison. That's option two. So I don't actually have to pierce Hamlet, even if I do this and scratch him, that poison will immediately start to work and Hamlet will die. There's no cure, no antidote. All right? So that's two ways in the fencing match that Hamlet will die. And the king says, and I've got a third. You guys are going to get hot and sweaty. There'll be a break. I'll prepare a chalice. Hamlet will drink from it. Poison. In other words, no matter what, Hamlet doesn't walk out of this fencing match alive. Okay? Queen comes in. Laertes, your sister's dead. Notice, she doesn't, break it softly. She just comes out. Laertes, your sister's drowned. Drowned? Where? Notice what he doesn't ask. Where? What's the location? He doesn't ask how. Why? Because, in one sense, to ask how is kind of silly. If you're drowned, it means you're in the water and you've died of lack of oxygen. What else could how mean? Accidentally? Murdered? Pushed in? Suicide? So Gertrude gives us a picture, or describes a picture. And this description she gives us was turned into a painting in the 19th century by one of the pre-Raphaelite painters. I can't remember which one. And the image is beautiful. You either got it in my office or in my office at home. And she's lying on the water, her arms are like this, and her gown is all spread out around her. And she's just looking up. And the idea is she's just floating gently on the stream. So, she says, she'd been weaving flowers into a crownet, a crown, like a wreath, okay? And a willow tree grew, she says, askance over a brook. That is, it grows at an angle over the brook. And Ophelia wanted to decorate the tree. She wanted to hang this garland in the tree. And so she goes out onto the branch, reaches, and according to Gertrude, the branch breaks. She falls in the water, and she's unaware that what is happening. She's lying there in the water, and her clothes eventually get soaking wet. And what happens if you're wearing a lot of clothes and you get in the water? It's hard to swim. It's hard to stay afloat. And she just drowns. Notice, by the way, what Gertrude's whole speech here presupposes. Somebody saw this. What question does that then beg? Why didn't they stop it? Why didn't someone save her? Okay? No idea. So, mermaid like a while her clothes bore her up, which time she chanted snatches of old lauds, that is, old hymns, as one incapable of her own distress. Incapable means unknowing. But she wasn't aware she was in the process of drowning. Then she is drowned. Okay? So, Laertes says, adieu, my lord, I have a speech of fire that fain would blaze, but that this folly drowns it. In other words, I could say a lot. The speech of fire is about the death of his sister. Okay? Act 5, a churchyard. Enter two clowns. Notice, the word clown was used to denote peasants as well as humorous characters. Here applied to the rustic type of clown. That doesn't really help a lot. What are these guys? What is their job? They're grave diggers. They work for the church, essentially, so that when there is a Christian burial, they go to the church cemetery, find the appropriate plot, and dig it up. Okay? Bear in mind, we start to see almost immediately when they're digging this grave, they come up on bones and they start throwing those bodies up. Why? Because they're reusing holy ground. Denmark is a very small country. The implication is they have to reuse graves. Standard practice in Shakespeare's day. Standard practice up parts of the world through the 19th century. We even have parts of the United States that did this. New Orleans, okay, as an example. Why? Because New Orleans is small, and up until first part of the probably mid-20th century, often flooded. So graves are above ground, and sometimes you reuse them. So the first clown comes in, the first grave digger comes in and says, is she to be buried in Christian burial when she willfully seeks her own salvation? Meaning, how does she willfully seek her own salvation? She killed herself. That's what the clown is suggesting. The problem is, according to the clown, she's being buried in hallowed ground, holy ground. Suicides, medieval teaching of the church, Catholic Church, suicides were never buried within holy ground in a church cemetery because they died unrepentant. They died unforgiven. Their deaths are different than Hamlet Sr.'s death. Hamlet Sr. didn't take his own life. He died, it's thought, accidentally from a serpent bite. Suicides don't go to purgatory. They go straight to hell. Because according to the theology of the medieval church, they did the unforgivable sin, the sin against the Holy Spirit, which was to say, my problem is too big, not even God can solve this, okay? So they committed suicide. Second clown, gravedigger, says, she is getting Christian burial. Therefore, make her grave straight, that is, do it quickly. But your gloss also suggests the straight might mean directionally, east-west. Why? Traditional Christian theology says that when Jesus returns, all the graves will be open and the people will rise and they will face east. And that's because he will come from the east. The very word to orient, the phrase to orient, means literally to face east. It's to face the orient. Orient means east, okay? And in many Christian jurisdictions, burials were done east-west. The feet would be placed at the east, the head would be placed at the west, so that when you rise, you stand up facing the east, okay? Jerusalem, so to speak. So, the coroner has sat on her and finds it Christian burial, meaning there's been a coroner's inquest. In England, standard practice, I don't know when this stopped or if this has stopped, but when somebody dies, there's a coroner's inquest. Or, let me rephrase that. If there's a suspicious death, there's a coroner's inquest to determine the cause of death. There would have been a coroner's inquest on Hamlet Sr., but because they didn't have the technology, they wouldn't know he was poisoned in the ear. They just thought a serpent bit him. Her, they have to have a coroner. How'd she die? How'd she fall in this creek? Okay? First clown. How? How did she get a Christian burial unless she drowned herself in her own defense? Earlier we heard someone say, I can't remember who, I think it was Gertrude, that Ophelia was at war against herself. She was at war with her judgment, meaning divided. Here the clown says, how could she get a Christian burial unless she was defending against herself? So we've seen earlier, not just in that passage about Ophelia, but also about Hamlet, that someone can be of two minds. That is, that the self can be divided and part of the self can be going against the self. Hamlet is going to follow that idea in just a few moments. We'll talk about it on Friday. We won't get there today. Okay? So, the second cloud says, it's found so. That is, it was an accidental death. First cloud, well, then it must be se offendendo. What he means is, your footnote points out, se defendendo, that it was self-defense. The first cloud turns that around. It was self-offense. It cannot be else. He says, here's the point. If I drown myself wittingly, that is, knowingly, it argues an act. That is, I did something. Act has three branches. Okay, the three branches aren't literally, it is to act, to do, to perform. The three branches of an act, this is Aristotle, okay, are you have to have the idea, you have to have the will, and then you have to do it. So it starts up here, and then the volition kicks in, and then the performance. His three things are all just act, 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 okay? Argal, ergo, corruption of Latin, she drowned herself wittingly. Second clown starts to say something. He said, no, look, here's how it is. Here's the water, here's a man. If the man goes to the water and drowns, he does it intentionally. But if the water comes to him, he's blameless. What's his point? The water didn't come to her. But is this law? The second clown asks. It is. It's a coroner's inquest law. Second clown gets to the point. In other words, they've been arguing around the periphery. And the second clown says, here's the real problem. If this had not been a gentlewoman, she would have been buried out of Christian burial. And by gentlewoman, he just means she's a high class person, daughter of the king's chief advisor. He's saying, if she had been my sister or your mother, where would she be buried? Outside the church cemetery. Bingo. There thou sayest. Okay? So he starts digging the grave again. Talks about Adam, etc. We're going to skip all that. Okay? Hamlet and Horatio come in. So the clowns keep going at it. They're over here. If this room is the stage, they're over here digging. And Hamlet and Horatio enter over here and watch them from a distance. They can hear the conversation. And the second clown leaves. The first clown sings a song. And Hamlet hears the song and says, line 57, has this fellow no feeling of his business that a sings at grave making? In other words, man, what a cold, hard-hearted, jaded person this is, that he doesn't express sorrow for the dead that is about to be buried. Horatio, he's done it so long, it no longer faces him. You're right, Hamlet says. First clown keeps singing. He throws up a skull. Hamlet, line 67. That skull had a tongue in it and could sing once, like the clown is singing. How the knave jaws it to the ground as if it were Cain's jawbone. That did the first murder. Notice the idea. Cain, first murderer, brother against brother. Claudius Hamlet. This might be the pate of a politician, which this ass now overreaches, one that would circumvent God. That is, he's saying, the skull might have belonged to a politician who went around God, who violated, took a shortcut around God's laws. I think what Hamlet is indicating here is something that Laertes is going to touch on in just a moment. You're right, it could, says Horatio. Or it could be a courtier. And Hamlet gives us an example of how courtiers speak, which could say, good morrow, sweet lord. How dost thou, sweet lord? What's he getting at there? What kind of person is a courtier? backside kisser, to put it politely, okay? A sycophant. Yeah, could. And now my lady worms, chapless and knocked about the mazzard with a sexton's spade. Here's fine revolution. That is, you start, you grow, and you come back to the beginning. You're born, boom, dust to dust. First clown, keeps singing, throws up another skull. Hamlet. Why may not that be the skull of a lawyer? Where be his quiddities now, his qualities, his cases, his tenures, his tricks? He chooses a lawyer because lawyers are known for their, to use the term he uses, his quiddities and quilities. There's another term, starts with a QU, quibbling. That is, debating the very, very fine points of meanings of a word. If you become a lawyer, you learn to use words. My son's a lawyer. You learn to use words very, very precisely. Bill Clinton famously, or infamously, in his, not impeachment, investigation by the Ken Starr thing in 1998 about the affair with Monica Lewinsky, he was being interviewed by the special prosecutor, and he quibbled on the meaning of the word is. And he famously said, well, it all depends on what the meaning of the word is. Well, there are 6 people in this room, and every one of us would tell you what the meaning of the word is. You bring in a lawyer, and you're going to get 6 other possible meanings, so to speak. That's Hamlet's point, okay? He could have been a real estate broker. He mentions other possibilities, okay? So, the clown keeps speaking, and the clown sings, oh, a pit of clay for to be made for such a guest is meet. A pit of clay, grave, is meet, it's fitting, it's appropriate, for such a guest, meaning a body. Why is it meet? Because the body is clay. From dust thou art, to dust shalt thou return. Hamlet, I think it's yours. Notice, Hamlet now for the first time speaks to the clown. I think the grave is yours, for thou liest in it. He's not literally prone, but he's in the grave, and that's what Hamlet means by liest. Clown, you lie out on it, sir. That is, you are speaking an untruth outside, and therefore it is not yours. For my part, I do not lie in it. That is, I am not lying in it, but it is mine. Why is it his? Hamlet, thou do lie in it, to be in it and say it is thine. You are telling a verbal untruth because you say it's yours, because why is it not his? Why does Hamlet say that's a lie? Because the gravedigger is still alive. The graves are for dead people. Okay? So he says, thou liest. Lie. Hamlet asks, who are you digging it for? No, it's not what he says. What man dost thou dig it for? For no man, sir. What woman then? None. Neither. Who is to be buried in it? One that was a woman. Notice, like a lawyer. Why is it for one that was a woman? Okay, it's Ophelia's grave. But where's Ophelia? She's gone. She's no longer a woman. The body, the clown is saying, is no longer a woman. Why? Because the body is dead. Woman implies living female human. Man implies living human male. You take the living out, it's neither human nor sexed anymore, or gendered if you want, according to the clown's thinking. One that was a woman, but rest her soul, she's dead. Hamlet, how absolute the knave is. Your gloss, absolute, positive, decided. Hamlet doesn't mean positive, decided. Hamlet means how particular, how fastidious with the meanings of words, how literal, if you want. We must speak by the card that is, Horatio, we better watch our language around this guy, or he's going to take our words to mean not what we intend, but what they literally mean. Okay? So he asks the gravedigger, how long hast thou been a grave maker? See, of all the days and the years, I came to it that day that our last king Hamlet overcame Fortinbras. Fortinbras, previous king of Norway, Fortinbras Senior, this is, Hamlet. When was that? Like he doesn't know. Cannot you tell that? Everyone can tell that. It was the very day that young Hamlet was born. He that is mad and sent into England. Notice what Hamlet then asks. He doesn't ask when that was. He asks, why was Hamlet sent into England? He takes the last part of the clown's speech. Well, because he was mad. Shall recover his wits there, or if it do not, it will be no great matter. Hamlet's like, why? Why won't it be a great matter if he's crazy in England? 'Twill not be seen in him there. There the men are as mad as he. Little self-deprecating English joke to get the laughter of everybody in the audience. Okay? Hamlet, how came he mad? How does one become crazy? Very strangely, they say. Well, yeah, it's because if it were not strange, he wouldn't be mad. Hamlet, how strangely? Notice what's going on. This is like an inquisition. This is like a lawyer interviewing somebody. You take their answer and you kind of do that 2-year-old why. Keep just delving into it. How strangely, faith, even with losing his wits. Well, that would be how one becomes mad. Hamlet, upon what ground? That is, what was the cause of him losing his wits? But the clown takes ground to mean ground. Well, in Denmark, he says. That's the ground where Hamlet lost his wits. He says, why, here in Denmark, I have been sexton here, man and boy, 30 years. How old is Hamlet? 30 years old. Now, knowing now that Hamlet is 30 years old, how does that affect your understanding of everything that's come up to this point in the play? Does Hamlet come across earlier in the play like a 30-year-old? Or the descriptions of Hamlet? Where was Hamlet before he came back to Elsinore for his father's funeral? He's at university. How many university students you know who are 30? Not many. Not even when I was a graduate student did I know many who were 30. Usually those that were 30 or older, and those that I have had that are 30 or older, are those who have gone back to school today because they want to get more pay from their job, their high school teachers or something like that, or a career change. Hamlet's not looking for a career change. He's a prince. That's pretty much his career. 30 years old. Okay. Hamlet asks, how long will a man lie on the earth before he rots? 8 or 9 years, unless he's a tanner. A tanner is someone who works with chemicals in the preservation of hides. Those chemicals that tanner breathes in, gets on him, so it tans his skin while living, so he'll survive longer in the ground. Okay? And then he pulls out a skull and says, here's a skull that's been in the ground 23 years. Whose is it? Hamlet asks. He says, who does he think I am? This was Yorick's skull, the king's jester. And Hamlet takes the skull and says, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. That almost always gets misquoted. You'll see it quoted, somebody's deciding whether or not they're going to enter a political battle, and they'll say, the so-and-so's like Hamlet, can't decide what to do, and they'll throw out the quote, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well. It's not what he says. I knew him, Horatio. And Hamlet talks about, okay, so Yorick's been dead 23 years, so Hamlet knew him from age 0, theoretically, to 7. And he talks about riding on his back and playing with him and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So he's holding the skull, and then he says, now get you to my lady's chamber. He's talking to the skull. He's telling the skull, go to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick, to this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. Who's the my lady? It's not a specific woman. It is any and all women. For what point? What does he tell the skull to do? Tell her, let her paint an inch thick. That is, let her put on an inch thick of makeup on her face. And tell her what? This is what you're going to look like. This is a memento mori, a reminder of death. Standard practice. Late Middle Ages, throughout the Renaissance. You're a painter, you've been called to do a portrait of a famous person, man or woman. Almost all of them, unless it's like a royal portrait, like the few portraits that there are of Queen Elizabeth. If it's an individual, and one of the most famous ones is of the Dutch philosopher, writer, Erasmus, is you've got the person in the height of their prime of their life, okay? Somewhere within the square or rectangle of that portrait, there will be a skull. So you have the person at 25 or 35, and somewhere there's just a bare skull. Often, the reason I'm reaching out here, often that person has their hand on it as an indication of, I know this doesn't last. This is what I'll become. Why? It's a reminder of death. It's to be a remembrance that no matter how powerful, how great, how wonderful, how beautiful I am, this is what we all come to, and this is what we all must prepare for. That's what Hamlet's getting at. Okay? Horatio, tell me one thing. What? Do you think Alexander looked like this? That is Alexander the Great. Conquered the ancient world, largest empire, if I remember correctly. Yep. Did he smell like that? Mm-hmm. To what base uses we may return, Horatio? To what base uses we may return? Base meaning ground, earth. Well, what are the base uses we may return that Hamlet has already discussed with the king? Remember when the king says, Hamlet, where's Polonius? He says, at supper. At supper, where? Not where is eaten, but where is being eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms, or an Ian atom. And he goes on and says, your fat emperor and your lean beggar are but variable service to the same table. What's the same table? We fat other things to fat ourselves. We fat ourselves to feed maggots. That's a base return. Okay? Horatio. Hamlet goes on. Why not imagination trace the noble dust of Alexander till it find him stopping a bunghole? What's a bunghole? Big old beer barrel or wine cask. It's got a hole in it that you put a spigot in order to get the liquid out. Well, before that spigot is put in, you've got a bunghole with a cork or stopper. Horatio says, you're thinking too fastidiously, too curiously. about it. He goes, no, I'm not. Think about it. Alexander died. Alexander was buried. Alexander returneth into dust. The dust is earth. Of earth we make loam. That is, you dig up the earth, you mix it with water and a little bit of clay. And why of that loam whereto he was converted might they not stop a beer barrel? Caesar, dead and turned to clay, might stop a hole to keep the wind away. A hole in a wall. Oh, that earth which kept the world in awe should patch a wall to expel the winter's flaw. In other words, Caesar, the greatest emperor who ever lived, becomes what? Chinking in a wall to stop the breeze. What's Hamlet's point? Why the hell are we here? What is our purpose? But then he notices the king come in. Okay? Enter King, Queen, Laertes, and the chorus of Ophelia in procession. But that description is a little bit inaccurate because it implies the king and queen and Laertes are leading this procession. They're not. They're following. Ophelia's body is being brought in first, and they are following her. Hamlet, who is this they follow? And with such maimed rights. What does he mean by maimed rights? Interestingly, your book doesn't gloss that at all. It's telling us Hamlet is familiar with the burial rites of the church. He's familiar with the prayers. He's familiar with the actions, how the priest would cense a body. Censer, bowl-like thing here has incense. You put, or has a charcoal thing. You put incense, smoke comes out, and they wave it like this to cense the body because the cense symbolizes the prayers for the dead. Okay? Who is this? He asks. With maimed rights. The maimed rights is telling us Hamlet listens to the prayers that the priest speaks, chants, as the body is brought in. And they're not right. They're not complete. They're not full. Parts are being skipped. This doth betoken the course, the body they follow, did with desperate hand fordo its own life. It took its own life. Hamlet knows out of practice and experience when someone is being buried who committed suicide, and someone is being buried who receives the full rites of the church and receives full Christian burial. And by watching and hearing, he knows the person that's being buried killed him or herself. Okay? Big question. Did Ophelia kill herself? Hamlet here implies she did. The priest implies she did. The first gravedigger implies she did. Gertrude's description of her death implies she didn't. That it was accidental and she was totally unaware. Okay? Why might she have been totally unaware? Or if she was totally unaware, then can she be held responsible for her own death? In other words, if she was mad, if she was crazy, can she have been said to have been in her right mind when she did it? Okay? Laertes, we hear. What ceremonials? What are the rituals? Hamlet, oh, that's Laertes, a very noble youth. Mark me, let's pay attention. What ceremony else? Why does he ask it twice? Is it because Hamlet interrupted him? Nope, he doesn't hear Hamlet. Even though Hamlet's on the stage, Hamlet and Horatio are over there. They're hiding. Why does he say it again? What ceremony else? He's telling that priest, get to work, damn it. I want the right prayers. The priest says, her obsequies have been as far extended, referring to the fact that suicides are not given full burial rights, is we have warranty. Warranty means as we have legal allowance to. Okay? Her death was doubtful, meaning there's a lot of unknowns regarding her death, but that great command o'ersways the order, she should in ground unsanctified have lodged till the last trumpet. So, great command o'ersways the order. We don't know what the order is, but the part about she should in ground unsanctified have lodged till the last trumpet is pretty clear. The priest is saying she doesn't deserve Christian burial. She doesn't deserve burial in Christian hallowed ground, in the churchyard. Up until probably the first third of the 20th century, 1930s or so, in England, if someone committed suicide, they would have partial rights of the Church of England, and then the burial would be, so if this is the church yard and the church is here, they'd be buried here, just outside the walls of the cemetery. Okay? And anybody who wasn't a Christian would be buried outside here also. So, but that the great command o'ersways the order. What's the great command? Go back for a second. This might be the fate of a politician, one that would circumvent God. Who issued a great command? The king. It's pretty clear. Claudius said, she gets Christian burial. Priest tries to talk. Just do it. Okay? Bear in mind, in England, I can't talk about Denmark, but Shakespeare's writing from his experience. In England, who's the head of the church in Shakespeare's day? The monarch, Queen Elizabeth. The monarch appoints the Archbishop of Canterbury. The monarch is the head of the church. What the monarch says goes. Okay? For charitable prayers, shards, flints, and pebbles should be thrown on her. The for there means instead of, in place of, charitable prayers. That is, prayers of charity. Charity comes from the Latin caritas, meaning love. Prayers of love, that is, for her salvation and redemption. Instead of those, what the priest says, what should she receive? People should throw shards, flints, and pebbles at her body. But here she is allowed her virgin krantz, garlands customarily hung upon the biers of unmarried women, her maiden instruments in the bringing home of bell and burial, the laying to rest of the body to the sound of the bell. Okay? And there's two different bells that's possibly referred to. Didn't mention this to my first class. Should have. One, I mentioned the censer. On that censer, there would be bells. So that when the censer is waved, bells ring. Okay? So that's one. The other one is a particularly English custom. When someone dies, the local church parish bell is rung. Okay? It's rung two different ways. One, tolling of the bell is to announce the death, okay, of a man or woman, and the other tolling of the bell announces the age of the deceased. So if a man dies, the bell is tolled 9 times. T-O-L-L-E-D. Boom, boom, 9 times. Then there's a pause. Then the bell tolls, I think it is once a minute, for every year the person lived. I think it's a minute, it might be like once in 10 seconds or something like that. So, if the person who dies, there are 5 tolls, that means a 5-year-old child has died. if the bell is rung 8 times, pause, 5, then that means a 5-year-old girl has died. And in most English small parish towns, the people would generally be aware of who was ill or not. So if they know little Susie is sick and they suddenly hear the bell, and those bells, when they toll, you can hear them for miles around. All right? When that years go and you, oh, little Susie's dead. It's a way of announcing the death, okay? So he's saying, she's getting the bells. And she gets the garlands. She gets most of the trappings. I can't do any more. Must there be no more done? No more be done. We should profane the service of the dead. We would, he says, corrupt. We would make unholy this service if we give her the full rights. Lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churlish priest, a ministering angel shall my sister be when thou liest howling. Liest howling where? Now, it could be that he's suggesting, what's your gloss say? I.e. in hell. It could be that. It could be on his deathbed. Howling, crying in pain. But she won't be a ministering angel to him. All right? More than likely, it's the when you lie in hell. Again, Calvinist would say a Roman Catholic priest is going to lie in hell. Because early Calvinists, all Catholics, were damned because they weren't good Calvinists. Only good Calvinists went to heaven. All right? So, the queen throws flowers into her grave. Laertes jumps into her grave and says, start covering us up. Pour so much dirt into here, he says, that of this flat a mountain you have made to overtop old Pelion or the skyish head of blue Olympus. Make this grave such a monument. Okay? And Hamlet hears and watches that. And now Hamlet stands forth. He approaches from hiding. What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis, whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder-wounded hearers? This is I, Hamlet the Dane. Hamlet's never spoken like that before. Why is he doing this? He knows this is Ophelia. And Hamlet leaps into the grave. Laertes, the devil take thy soul. We're told grappling with him. He's not grappling with him. He's grabbed Hamlet by the throat. How do we know? Well, priest, not well. Take thy fingers from my throat, Hamlet says. Okay? He says, careful, Laertes, I'm dangerous. King says, pluck them of thunder. Okay? They part them. They come out of the grave. And Hamlet says, I will fight with him upon this theme until my eyelids will no longer wag. That is, move. I will fight with him on this theme until I'm dead. And the queen's like, what theme, Hamlet? What are you talking about? Hamlet, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? Now, pause for a second and go back to Gertrude's speech when she scatters the flowers. Notice what she says. Sweets to the sweet, farewell. I hoped thou shouldst have been my Hamlet's wife. What did Laertes tell her? When he says, I know you've been spending time with Hamlet. He's out of your star. He only wants sex. What does Polonius tell her? He's out of your star. He only wants sex. What did she say about Hamlet's tenders of affection? They were made with almost all the holy vows of heaven. Almost. Why? Because they weren't married yet. It's like he betrothed himself unto her without the formal recognition of an engagement. I'm saying it's like, I'm not saying he did, okay? But that's how she took it. And her father and her brother persuade her otherwise. So that when Hamlet sees her in the to be or not, right after the to be or not to be speech, she says, here, these are for you. And says, what about them? They've lost their savor. They've lost their scent. Why? Because the giver has proven unkind. When she gives those back, she's telling Hamlet, you didn't really love me. And Hamlet says, I loved you once. I believed it. And then he goes on and says, you shouldn't have. Why? Well, look at what she's just done. They talk a little bit more. Where's your father? He's at home. He's like, damn. Even you. It's like everyone is arrayed against him. Okay, we'll stop there. We're going to pick up with Hamlet asking Laertes what he would do, to show his real love for his sister. And we'll pick up there. We'll finish Hamlet on Friday. I'll put up a quiz on Friday. That'll be over Acts 4 and 5. And then probably, it won't be due till Monday, probably at the earliest. And then on Monday, I'll put up the exam that's over all of the drama. So going way back to Sophocles. So it'll be an exam over the 4 plays, the introductions, that kind of stuff. And then starting next week, Monday, we'll get into the poetry. We've got a couple days to make up. We're going to have to cram some stuff in together. All right, have a good day.